Hey, shalom, shalom from your Dutch Uncle John, here to tell you what it is in the Hebrew alphabet. We're still in Kyrgyzstan. Okay, today we've got the choice between one of two topics. One of them is the letter Pei. The other one isn't. So we're going to do Pei. Okay. Pei is the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. It has a Gematria of 80, and the ancient picture is a mouth. Okay? The letter Pei is spelled Pei Aleph. If you're using it in the word mouth, it's Pei Hey. That's the word for mouth. Pronounced the same. And Pei makes the P sound as in puppy. The Pei is the letter P as in puppy. Hey. Here. Good boy. It also makes the F sound as in ferocious. Pei can also make the F sound, as in ferocious. There are 304,805 letters in the Torah. Pei has 4,805 times it shows up, which is interesting because if you notice the total number of letters in the Torah, if you take the Pei out of the Torah, there's exactly 300,000 letters in the Torah. I don't know what to do with that information, but it's kind of clever that's there. P in the Greek is the letter pi, or as a lot of foreigners pronounce P. To make a Pei, you start with a Kaf, and you add a yod. Got it? Nice. There is a cursive version of Pei, and I should point out that Pei has two forms. Remember how some of the letters have a final form? Pei is one of them. Okay? And so there's two cursive letters. And this is just an oddity that I'd like to point out. Look in Deuteronomy 15, starting in verse 7. It says, "If there is among you a poor man of your brethren within any of the gates in your land which the Lord your God is giving you, you shall not harden your heart nor shut your hand from your poor brother. But you shall open wide your hand to him, and willingly lend him sufficient for his need, whatever he needs." That word for wide, you should open your hand wide, is patach. It's spelled Pei, Tav, Chet. But in many Torah scrolls, not all, the Pei is written differently. And not just here, but other places also. And if we zoom in, you can see it's actually a Pei inside of a Pei. And whenever you see this special Pei in a Pei, this is to put extra emphasis on the verse. So when it says to open your hand wide, I mean, it means wide. You lend this man whatever he needs. And because Pei represents mouth, and it has the double Pei, not only do you open your hand, you open your mouth, and you comfort him and give him support, both financially or whatever he needs, and verbally. It's just a nice picture there. Looking at the Gematria of all the letters, Pei, its value is 80. And there are, remember, 5 Hebrew letters that have final forms. The letter Kaf, remember the Gematria goes 1 through 10, and it jumps 20, 30, 40 to 100, 200, 300, 400 for the letter Tav. Then if you put the final forms in, the final Kaf, or the Kaf Sophit, is 500. The Mem Sophit is 600. The Nun Sophit is 700. The Pei Sophit is 800. And the Tzadi Sophit is 900. Then it jumps back to Aleph. Aleph, which is the letter Aleph, but you put a little apostrophe after it. That represents 1,000. Bet with a little apostrophe is 2,000. Gimel 3,000. So you can represent very large numbers in Hebrew. Now, plugging these numbers into words do not result in incredible finds. You just use the 1 to 400 in the plugging into words. But if you're dealing with math, you can use the bigger numbers and use the final form letters for that. As we said, the Pei has 2 sounds. Just like in English, the P can be a P sound. It can also be a F sound, as in phone, right? And in modern Hebrew, they put a dot inside the Pei to represent the P sound, and they leave the dot out if it represents the F sound. And that also applies to the Sophit, the final form letters. In the original Torah, they don't have this dot. The dot is called a dagash. Okay. Now, the letter Aleph, you know, that's the first letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And Aleph is a letter, but Aleph is also a word. And you spell Aleph, Aleph, Lamed, Pei. And here the Pei represents the F sound. And just, I think this is very cool. If you take the first 2 letters, Aleph, Lamed. Remember, Aleph is strength. Lamed is the shepherd's crook. So just the first 2, Aleph, Lamed, spell El, short for Elohim. And it represents the strong shepherd. El. Perfect name for God. We are the dumb sheep. He is the strong shepherd. And then you have the Pei. Pei represents mouth. So just from the first 3 letters here, the 3 letters in Aleph, you have from the mouth of El. From God's mouth. Very nice. And notice the Gematria of Aleph. Aleph is 1, Lamed is 30, Pei is 80. It adds up to 111, 111, which is 3 times 37. There's our 37s again. And as we said, Pei has 2 forms, right? The first form, normal Pei, is a closed mouth. It looks like a closed mouth. And then the final form represents an open mouth. Okay? And in the Hebrew, you know, in Genesis 1:1, Bereshit bara Elohim et hashemayim va'et haaretz. He begins the Bible with the letter Bet, the second letter of the Hebrew alphabet. Why did he do that? Why did he began the 10 Commandments with Aleph? He began his name, his title, Elohim. He began, when Moses asked, what is your name? Eiyah, Ashur Eiyah, Aleph, Aleph, Aleph. He begins a lot of things with Aleph that are important. Why didn't he begin the Bible, the Torah, with an Aleph? Because God, he is out in eternity past. He's out there before Torah. Here's Genesis 1:1. Here's Aleph out in front. And Aleph, we can spell it out. Aleph Lamed Pei. And what is Aleph Lamed Pei? from the mouth of God. Came Torah. Here is the word Aleph, but it's actually kind of misspelled because I have the wrong pay at the end. But I want you to notice that inside of that pay, you can fit the letter bet. So it's from the mouth of God. There in God's mouth is a bet. It's sitting there, it's waiting, and then he opens his mouth and out comes Bereshit bara Elohim, the Torah. Beautiful. And it kind of reminds me of Psalm 33:6. By the word of Yahweh the heavens were made, and by the breath of his mouth all their hosts. There it is. Let's look at Isaiah 9, starting in verse 6 and 7. We're just going to read 6. For a child will be born to us, and a son will be given to us, and the government will rest on his shoulders. And his name will be called Wonderful, Counselor, Mighty God, Eternal Father, Prince of Peace. Okay, you see this one on Christmas cards, and very famous verse. First of all, it's telling, this is a messianic verse. It's telling you that a child will be born. It's letting you know that the Messiah is going to be a human being, a man. He's going to be born. And a son will be given to us. This is pointing to his divinity, the complex unity, right? That God the Father is going to give his son. The government will rest on his shoulders, and his name will be called, and these are separate words, Wonderful, Counselor. He's not Wonderful Counselor. Those are two separate things. Mighty God. It's letting you know that the Messiah is going to be God. Eternal Father and Sar Shalom, Prince of Peace. But let's focus in on that word wonderful. That word wonderful is Pele. It's a Pei Lamed Aleph, which also adds up Gematria to 111, which is 3 times 37. And you'll notice that wonderful Pele is Aleph spelled backwards. It's a hint that this Messiah is going to be Aleph, is going to be God. It says in the verse, he will be called Mighty God. Hints. It's loaded with hints. Okay. Another, or a word that begins with Pei is Panim. And Panim represents face. And you can see it kind of looks like a face there. There is the mouth and the nose sticking down, or maybe a tooth sticking down in the mouth. Okay, Pei looks like that. And the first time we see this is back in Genesis 1:2. It shows up twice. And the earth was without form and void. Tohu vabohu. And darkness, choshek, was on the pani of the deep. And the Ruach Elohim was hovering over the pani ha-mayim, the face of the waters. So there it shows up twice. That also is the first Pei in the Bible, okay, in the word face. Look in Exodus 4, verse 10. It says, And Moses said to Yahweh, O my Lord, I am not eloquent, neither before nor since you have spoken to your servant, but I am slow of mouth, Pei, and slow of tongue. This is when God tells Moses, I want you to go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. And Moses brings up his speech condition. Moses, by the way, Moses was 80 years old whenever he goes up Mount Sinai and gets these instructions, go and tell Pharaoh, let my people go. Psalm 90, verse 10 says, the length of our days is 70 years. Or 80 if we are strong. Yet their pride is but labor and sorrow, for they quickly pass and we fly away. So man is given 70 years. But 80 if we are strong. And it's interesting, 80 is the Gematria for pay. And Moses, he was strong. He was 80 when he got these instructions. And he spent the next 40 years leading the people out of Egypt and across the Sinai. Okay, that's pretty cool. By the way, happy birthday to my mother. She turned 80 today that we're filming. So Moses, remember, 40, 40, and 40. Spent the first 40 years in Egypt, the next 40 years in the Sinai, in Midian, where he gets married and then goes up and sees the burning bush. And then he spends the last 40 years leading the people to the promised land. So whenever Moses brings up this speech condition, God tells him, now therefore go, and I will be your mouth and teach you what to say. There again, there's peka. It's pay with a final cough on the end. Remember, the final cough is an open palm. And if you put that as a suffix, it's your. If you put a yod at the end, it's my. If you put a cough on the end, it's your mouth, peka. And it's kind of cool. This verse, he says, I will be your mouth. And this is, Anoki is I. So God is telling Moses, I, Anoki. The word Anoki is Aleph is 1, Nun is 50, Kaf is 20, and Yod is 10. The word I adds up to 81. Interesting, because the word pay, the letter pay, adds up to 81. It's a pay and an Aleph. And God is saying, I, 81, will be your pay, your mouth. The 81's showing that God will be in Moses' mouth. Very nice. Very nice. Psalm 81:10 kind of reconfirms that I, Yahweh, am your Elohim, who brought you up from the land of Egypt. Open your mouth wide and I will fill it. God will give us the words. We're told this in the New Testament also, right? Whenever we're debating somebody, and don't worry about what you're going to say. Turn it over to the Holy Spirit, and He will put His words in your mouth, and He will bring to memory what you need to say. Nice. So Moses goes to Pharaoh and tells him, let my people go. Well, Pharaoh begins with a pay. You can see pay, resh, ayin, hey, paro. And in his name, look, the first and last letter is a pay, hey. That's the word mouth. And the letters in the center, resh, ayin, spell the word ra, which is evil. So Pharaoh, his name actually means the mouth of evil. Very appropriate name. And you know, a very clever, funny story about that is Exodus 1, starting in verse 10. And we're just going to read 2 verses here. But this is before remember, Joseph, he ended up in Egypt, and he invited the whole family, and Jacob came and all the tribes, and they just multiplied and multiplied. And the Pharaoh at the time gave them the choice land in Goshen. And that's how, and then Joseph dies. And now Exodus begins, and it's years later, and there's a new Pharaoh, and he forgot about all the great things that Joseph did. And the new Pharaoh says in verse 10 of Exodus 1, come, let us deal wisely with them, lest they multiply. And in the event of war, they will also join themselves to those who hate us and fight against us and depart from the land. He doesn't want them leaving. He doesn't want them joining against the enemy. So we need to deal wisely with them. And the new Pharaoh enslaves the Jews. And verse 12 then says, but the more they afflicted them, the more they multiplied. and the more they spread out, so that they were in dread of the sons of Israel. So, very clever. The more Pharaoh abused and enslaved the people so they wouldn't multiply, the more they multiplied. Well, those two phrases, lest they multiply and the more they multiplied, here are the two phrases. Notice, they look very similar. In fact, the second words in both, it must be multiplied, they're exactly the same. The first word is pay noon, for lest they multiply, and the more they multiplied is kaf noon. The only difference is the pay and the kaf. And remember, the pay represents a mouth, and it looks like a mouth with a tooth hanging down. What's kind of funny, because Job 29:17 says, this is God speaking, I broke the jaws of the wicked and snatched the prey from his teeth. And you can see the more they enslaved, the more they multiplied. God knocked the tooth out of Pharaoh's mouth. Very clever God. Okay, Exodus 12:23. And Yahweh will pass through to smite the Egyptians. And when he sees the blood on the lintel and on the two doorposts, Yahweh will pass over the door and will not allow the destroyer to come into your houses to smite you. Okay, this is, remember Moses said, let my people go. Pharaoh said, no, 9 plagues are sent. And then there's a 10th plague that's being sent, where you have to bring in the Passover lamb, and you have to live with that lamb for 4 days and get to know and love, and you bring him in on the 10th day of Nisan. And on the 14th day of Nisan, the whole family gathers together, and you sacrifice that lamb, and the father takes the blood on a hyssop branch, and he strikes the lintel of the doorpost. And when God passes over that night, if he sees the blood on the doorpost, he will pass over that house. Otherwise, the firstborn in Egypt dies. And that's the firstborn of every human and of the livestock. Everybody, firstborn, dies. Notice in that verse, you've got Aleph Tav twice. You don't see it in the English. I put it in there. But in the Hebrew, it's in there twice. Remember, Aleph Tav is Aleph Tav, God on the cross. The first and the last Hebrew letter. Aleph Tav represents Yeshua. And Yeshua is tied very tightly to this whole Passover. Yeshua, Jesus, is the Passover lamb. The reason we've been doing Passover, the Jews were doing Passover, is to get the concept, which they can do it year after year after year and rehearse, so that when it is fulfilled with Yeshua, they would recognize it. Jesus himself, Yeshua, he came into Jerusalem on the 10th day of Nisan. And he went to his father's house, and they inspected him for 4 days, quizzing him to make sure he was perfect. And on the 14th day of Nisan, he is crucified. He's put on the cross, right? Look at a door frame. You put the blood on the top, where Jesus had blood up here with a crown of thorns. Both hands, blood, blood. Blood from his feet, down at the bottom. Blood dripped from the door, the lintel, down the same. Jesus is the door. He fits perfectly into that door frame here. Okay, but I digress. Okay, so Passover in Hebrew is Pesach, and it begins with a pay. All right? And Pesach, by the way, which means to pass over. It's the Hebrew word to pass over. It can be divided. It's the letter pei is mouth, and the word sahak is to talk. So Passover actually means the mouth talks, if you break it into 2 words. The mouth talks. Why is Passover related to the mouth talking? Okay, well remember, Pharaoh, the mouth of evil, he wouldn't let them go and worship their God. He would enslave them. He was holding them down, okay? But after Pesach, the mouth talks. You are free. Freedom of speech. Freedom of religion. Freedom, you understand? Look in Exodus 12, 23. 24. And you shall observe this event as an ordinance for you and your children forever. And when your children say to you, what does this rite mean to you? And you shall say, it is a Passover sacrifice to Yahweh, who passed over the houses of the sons of Israel in Egypt, when he smote the Egyptians, but spared our homes. And the people bowed low and worshipped. Jews ask this question every year at Passover. Why do we celebrate this? Okay, and the mouth talks, Pesach. They tell their children, and their children tell their children. And it's been going on forever, as the verse says. Beautiful. Quite a difference compared to Pharaoh, the mouth of evil, versus Passover, the mouth talks. Love it. And you know what? Your mouth speaking. This is a very important part of salvation. Romans 10:9 says that if you confess with your mouth, Jesus, Yeshua is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead, you will be saved. Make sure you understand that verse. You must confess with your mouth. Yeshua is Lord. That is so important. You know, I've been into a lot of Christian churches, and they have an altar call, and they say, if you would like to invite Jesus into your heart, come forward. Let me tell you, there is nothing in the Bible about inviting Jesus into your heart. That is not salvation. You understand? It says you must confess with your mouth that Jesus, Yeshua, is Lord, and believe in your heart that God raised him from the dead. You will be saved. Make sure your preachers know this. All right. I digress. Let's have a drink. Today we have pomegranate juice. Pomegranate juice. A very holy fruit in the Bible. Okay, here are some other names and words that begin with pay. Genesis 37, verse 36. Meanwhile, the Midianites sold him, this is Joseph, in Egypt to Potiphar, an officer of Pharaoh and captain of the guard. This is nice. Potiphar. Look, it's got two pays in his name. The first one is the Potiphar, and then the second one is the Phay. So you have Pay and Phay both showing up in his name. All right. That's Genesis 37. If you go to Genesis 38, that's the story of Judah and Tamar. And we won't go into the whole story, but Tamar and Judah sleeps with Tamar, and she becomes pregnant. And she has twins. And the first one to breach out, okay, is Peretz. And in verse 29 of 38 it says, but it came about as he, the first baby, drew back his hand, that's Zerach, that behold, his brother came out. Then she said, what a breach you have made for yourself. So she named him Peretz. Peretz in Hebrew means breach. Then we go to Genesis 41, verse 45, starting. Oh no, this is the whole verse we're going to read. This is a payday of pays. It says, then Pharaoh named Yosef Zappaneth Paneah, and he gave him Asenath, the daughter of Potiphera, priest of On, as his wife. And Yosef went forth over the land of Egypt. Wow, look at all the pays in there. You got Pharaoh. You got Joseph. Yosef ends as a final pay on his name with the Phay. He named him Zappaneth Paneah. You got two pays in there. And he gave him Asenath as wife, and she was the daughter of Potiphera. Potiphera has two pays, a pay and a Phay. And Yosef went forth. There's another final pay in Joseph's name. Wow, that one's loaded with pays. In Numbers 25:11, you have Phinehas. Phinehas, the son of Eleazar, the son of Aaron the priest, has turned away my wrath from the sons of Israel, in that he was zealous for my jealousy, for my zeal among them, so that I did not destroy the sons of Israel in my jealousy. So that's Phinehas. Remember, he went in, I think he drove the tent stake through the guy's head, okay, who was, or killed the, I forget how he actually killed the guy. I think that was how he did it. But he, yeah, because somebody from Israel was sleeping and having sex with the foreigners, right? And they weren't supposed to be mixing. And God was actually happy that he did this. Phinehas begins with a Phay, all right? And in Hebrew, you know, we say, I know in the Christian world we say Phinehas, but in the Hebrew word it's Pinchas. Look, it's a chet in there. It's the fourth letter. It's not a hay. So it's not Phineas, it's Pinchas. Pinchas. All right? I think the Jews actually say Pinchas. 1 Samuel 17:36. This is David and Goliath, right? And David, hey, I'm going to go fight this 9-foot Philistine. And the people were like, "Are you sure?" The king is Saul. "Are you sure you can do this?" And David says, "Your servant has killed both a lion and a bear, and this uncircumcised Philistine will be like one of them, for he has defied the armies of the living God." The Philistine begins with a pay, Philishti in Hebrew. In Esther chapter 9, verse 26, remember Haman, boo, Haman, boo. He wanted to destroy all the Jews because Mordecai wouldn't bow down to him. And he got the king's permission to kill all the Jews, and he cast a pur. He cast a lot, okay, to choose a day when he would actually kill all the Jews. And Esther went in and confronted the king and got permission to fight back. And the Jews celebrate these days that they were able to fight back and stop this slaughter. And this holiday, it's not one of the Moedim, but this holiday is called Purim or Purim, okay? It's remembering the day that the lot, the pur, was cast, and that they overcame this. Esther 9:26, therefore they called these days Purim, after the name Pur, and because of the instructions in this letter, both what they had seen in this regard and what had happened to them. Genesis 1:11, this is a nice word that you should know that begins with a pay. And it says, and God said, let the earth sprout vegetation, plants yielding seed, and fruit trees on the earth bearing fruit, after their kind with seed in them. And it was so. And then you have in Genesis 48:20, you have Ephraim. Remember, Joseph has two sons, Ephraim and Manasseh. And in verse 20, it says, and that day he blessed them. This is Jacob. And that day Jacob blessed them and said, by you shall Israel pronounce this blessing. May God make you like Ephraim and Manasseh. So he put Ephraim before Manasseh. Ephraim has fruit in his name. Look, there's a pei, resh, yod. Ephraim is going to be fruitful. Anytime you hear that PH or PHRI, PHRA, that's fruit. You know, what was Micah 4:2? Or Micah 2:4, 4:2. But you, Bethlehem Ephratah, are smallest among the tribes of Judah, From you will come forth the Messiah, right? It's prophesying coming from Bethlehem, but it's from Bethlehem Ephratah, fruitful. Very nice. Okay, let's jump into Lamentations chapter 1. I have it here in the Hebrew. Can you squint and see it? Probably not. Instead, what I'm going to do is let's just take the first word of each verse and enlarge. So here it is. You see them? There they are. The first verse begins with an aleph. The second verse begins with a bet. You have an acrostic here. There's 22 verses, and each one begins with the next letter of the Hebrew alphabet. How clever. Okay? Remember, we've seen this before in Psalms, right? He does this. So there's chapter 1 of Lamentations. Here's chapter 2. Again, too hard to see. Let's zoom in. Boom, there it is. Oh, there's verse 1, Aleph, Beit, Gimel, Dalet, Hey. You see, very nice, very nice. Wait a minute. Look at verse 16 and 17. Remember, Pei is the 17th letter of the Hebrew alphabet. And if my memory serves me, Ayin is the 16th letter. He has the Ayin and the Pei switched in Lamentations chapter 2. Oh yeah, look back at Lamentations 1. He's got them in the right order. Ayin first, Pei next. But Ayin 16, Pei 17. But in chapter 2, he's got it backwards. Well, that's interesting. Wonder why. Okay, well, let's read those two verses. In chapter 16 of Lamentations 2, it says, all your enemies have opened their mouth against you. Look at that as a hint. Opened their mouth, Pei is mouth. They hiss and gnash their teeth, Pei, teeth, mouth. They say, we have swallowed her up. Swallowing, mouth, Pei, I get it. Surely this is the day we have waited for. We have found it, we have seen it. Seen it represents eyes, the seeing, eye. And you know what? The letter Ayin represents the eye. So we've got mouth, we've got teeth, we've got swallowing, and then we have seen, eye. Yeah, the verse even has the content switched. It talks about mouth before seeing. Okay? Let's jump to Lamentations 3. Lamentations 3 has 66 verses. Well, that's interesting because 66 can be divided by 22. And look, the first 3 verses are Aleph. Then the next 3 verses, 4, 5, and 6, begin with Bet. 7, 8, and 9 begin with Gimel. He's doing the same acrostic, but he's doing 3 at a time. And there's all the verses up through 33. Here are the verses onward down to 66. And sure enough, look, he's got them backwards. The Pei and the Ayin are switched again. Interesting. Well, let's look at the verses. Lamentations 46. All our enemies have opened their mouths against us. Panic and pitfall have befallen us, devastation and destruction. My eyes run down with streams of water because of the destruction of the daughter of my people. 49. My eyes pour down unceasingly without stopping until the Lord looks down and sees from heaven. My eyes bring pain to my soul because of all the daughters of my city. Here again, the mouth comes before the eye. Yep, look how many times eyes show up. Lamentations 4, he does it again. 16 and 17 are switched. The Pei comes before the eye. And what does the verse say? The face of the Lord scattered them. He no longer regards them. The people do not respect the face of priests, nor show favor to the elders. Pei, face, right? And in 17, it says, still our eyes failed us, watching vainly for our help. In our watching we watched for a nation that could not save us. And there's eyes and watching and watched. Okay. In chapter 5, and there's only 5 chapters in Lamentations, it's complete. There's no order. And some letters are repeated. There's nothing going on there. So why do these, well, we see why he switched those letters, because he had mouth before ayin, but why is that even important? Well, you know, the Hebrew letters, each letter, or many of the Hebrew letters represent body parts, right? The resh is head, rosh, right? The yod was hand. The shin is shen, tooth. So we've covered a lot of these in previous videos. The letter ayin, if you remember, represents eye. And the letter pei represents mouth. It's no surprise that ayin comes before pei, because he wants you to see. Ayin represents knowledge. He wants you to see and know and understand before you open your pei and speak. You should always see before speaking. It makes logical sense. And in the Hebrew alphabet, ayin comes before pei. But in these verses in Lamentations, the people were speaking before they were seeing, right? And it's all pointing back to, remember when they were about to enter the promised land, and God told Moses, this is Numbers 13. Let's just start reading some of the verses here. Numbers 13, then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, send out for yourself men, so that they may spy out the land of Canaan, which I am going to give to the sons of Israel. You shall send a man from each of the fathers' tribes, every one a leader among them. So Moses sent them from the wilderness of Paran at the command of the Yahweh, all of them men who were heads of the sons of Israel. Jump down to verse 17. When Moses sent them to spy out the land of Canaan, he said to them, go up there into the Negev, then go up into the hill country. See what the land is like, and whether the people who live in it are strong or weak, whether they are few or many. How is the land in which they live? Is it good or bad? And how are the cities in which they live? Are they like open camps or with fortifications? How is the land? Is it fat or lean? Are there trees in it or not? Make an effort then to get some of the fruit of the land. Now the time was the time of the first ripe grapes. Verse 21. So they went up and spied out the land from the wilderness of Zin as far as Rehob at Lebo Hamath. When they had gone up into the Negev, they came to Hebron, where Ahiman and Sheshai and Talmai, the descendants of Anak, were. Now Hebron was built 7 years before Zoan in Egypt. Then they came to the valley of Eshol, from where they cut down a branch with a single cluster of grapes, and they carried it on a pole between 2 men, with some of the pomegranates and the figs. That place was called the Valley of Eshol because of the cluster which the sons of Israel cut down from there. Verse 31. But the men who had gone up with him said, this is now they come back from spying, and now they're bringing their report. But the men who had gone up with him said, we are not able to go up against the people, for they are too strong for us. So they gave out to the sons of Israel a bad report of the land, which they had spied out, saying, the land through which we have gone in spying it out is a land that devours its inhabitants. And all the people whom we saw in it are men of great size. There are also Nephilim, the sons of Anak, are part of the Nephilim. And we became like grasshoppers in our sight. And so we were in their sight. So the spies came back and spoke what they did not see. They, again, switched. They pay before they ayin. You understand? And Lamentations, I think Jeremiah here is lamenting the fact that these 10 of the spies did this. And the people, when they came back and made this report, oh no, we can't invade. The people, we were grasshoppers in their sight. Well, no, they did not see that. You understand? They spoke what they did not see. And you're not supposed to speak, you're not supposed to pay before ayin. Now, you know, in Lamentations 1, he didn't switch them. Remember? In Lamentations 1, why didn't he switch them there? Probably because in Numbers 13, when they did come back, they did tell a little bit of truth of what they saw. You know, a good lie always has a little bit of truth in it. Look in Numbers 13, verse 25. When they returned from spying out the land at the end of 40 days, they proceeded to come to Moses and Aaron and to all the congregation of the sons of Israel in the wilderness of Paran at Kadesh. And they brought back word to them and to all the congregation and showed them the fruit of the land. Thus they told him and said, we went into the land where you sent us, and it certainly does flow with milk and honey, and this is its fruit. Verse 28, nevertheless, the people who live in the land are strong, and the cities are fortified and very large, and moreover, we saw descendants of Anak there. Well, that's a true statement. They did see that. Amalek is living in the land of the Negev, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites are all living in the hill country, and the Canaanites are living by the sea and by the side of the Jordan. Then Caleb quieted the people before Moses and said, we should by all means go up and take possession of it, for we will surely overcome it. Caleb is the only voice of reason. Well, Caleb and Joshua, they were the two voices of reason. But the other 10, see, notice they gave a report that was partly true. Yes, we saw descendants of Anak there, and there were these groups, and they were living here, living there. So there was a bit of truth. So Lamentations 1 has the right order, but then they start talking about grasshoppers in their sight and stuff that they didn't see, and Lamentations, the pay and the ayin got switched. Oh, that's what I think. All right. Another word that begins with pay is pardes. We've talked about this when we did the dalet, and I told you when we get to the next letter, we'll do another pardes. Pardes is the Hebrew word for orchard. And an orchard is a place where you can gather and glean much fruit. Peri. There's your new word. Okay? And so, this is not a original biblical concept. This is actually something that this concept here was formed around the 13th century AD. A rabbi figured that, every verse, there's levels to what you can glean from a verse. And I don't doubt that this is true. And it seemed, we gave example before, we'll give one now. The 4 letters of pardes is a pei, and pei stands for peshat. And the peshat is the literal meaning of a verse. Next is the resh, the remez. And the remez, if you read a verse, there's a hint or an allegory that you can glean from that verse. The drosh level begins with dalet, and this is an application that you can pull out of that verse to your life. And then the final is the sod. The sod level is the deep mystery that's hidden in that verse. And it wouldn't surprise me if there are, I've heard rabbis say that there are 70 levels of interpretation, but we'll stick with the 4 right now. And we'll pick a verse and show you how these 4 letters in pardes apply. Let's do Genesis 1:1, which says, in beginning God created the heavens and the earth. Okay? From the Peshat level, you know what I can glean from this? In the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. That's what I glean. That's the Peshat level. The Peshat level always is the literal meaning, and none of the other meanings levels can contradict the Peshat level. Keep that in mind. Okay, let's look at the remez. Let's see what hint we can get from this verse. Well, we told you earlier that Aleph is 1, and Eleph, which is also Aleph with an apostrophe, Eleph is 1,000. Okay? Well, look at the verse. In this verse, there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 Alephs. Yep. The first 2 Alephs are in the first and second word. They're the third letter of the first word, and they are the third letter of the second word. Then Aleph is the first letter of the third word, and the first letter of the fourth word. And then Aleph is the second letter of the 6th word, and the second letter of the final 7th word. There's some order there. 3, 3, 1, 1, 2, 2. And if Eleph is 1,000, then the first 2 Alephs, each one is 1,000. That represents 2,000 years. And the next 2 Alephs represent 2,000 years. And the final 2 Alephs represent 2,000 years. Okay, well, you know, if you do the calculation from Adam until Yahshua Jesus, that adds up to about 4,000 years. And from Yahshua Jesus until today is about 2,000 years. So far we have 6,000 years. And we know when Messiah comes back, he's going to rule and reign for 1,000 years. There's the 7th 1,000-year period. And you end up having 7,000 years total, which is, you know, to God, a day is 1,000 years, and 1,000 years is like a day. So 7,000 years is a week to God. That's what he put aside for this whole mankind endeavor. All right? So the first 2,000 years, we have God is concealed. We do see him in Genesis 1:1. He does give command to Noah. But this period here covers from Adam to Abraham, the first 2,000 years. Then, and the Aleph show up third. They're buried in each of the first and second word. They're hidden. They're concealed. Then he comes right out in the third and fourth word. He's first. Here God is revealed. Okay? He comes to Abraham. He comes to Isaac. He comes to Jacob. He's talking to these people. You understand? He's revealed. And this covers the period from Abraham, the 2,000 years, from Abraham until Christ. Then the last 2 represent the 2,000 years, and this is the God as Messiah. This is the last 2,000 years. And 2, by the way, remember represents Aleph Bet. Bet is the son. Bar, Ben. Okay? And you have, this is the period from Christ until the present. Very nice. On the Drosh level, here's what you can glean from the Drosh level. You know, scientists say to make a universe, you need 3 things. You need time, you need space, and you need matter. Well, Genesis 1:1 has all 3 of those. In beginning, Bereshit is time. Hashemayim is heavens, space. Haaretz is the earth, matter. And so you have this Elohim, Bereshit bara Elohim, who shows up third. His title shows up third in the verse. And he creates these 3 things, time, space, and matter. And each of the 3 things, time is also a 3ness, past, present, and future. Space is length, width, and depth. Matter is solid, liquid, and gas. So you've got a triune God, shows up third, creates a trinity of trinities. And the scientists will actually argue then, well, you actually need two other things. You need action, something has to move and happen, and you need a force to get it moving. Well, we have action, we have the word bara, created, okay? And we have a force. The force is Elohim, right there. So all five things required to create a universe are hidden, and that's all. This is the interpretation we get from the Drosh level. And the only other two letters left, or the two words left, are the fourth and sixth, and that's et and va'et. Well, here you have this et, shows up twice. Remember et is the aleph and the tav. It's the first and the last letters of the Hebrew alphabet. First and last. Who claimed to be the Alpha and Omega, the first and the last? And remember, aleph is God's letter, and tav represents a covenant or the cross. So aleph tav is God on the cross. This aleph tav shows up twice is Yeshua. And Yeshua did show up twice. So he showed up once in the 4,000 years, at the end of the 4,000 years. And he's coming back in the end of the 6,000 years to set up his 1,000 years of peace. So very clever in the Drosh level, what he has there that you can apply to your life. Okay, and on the Sod level, let's look at Deuteronomy 18:18. This is where God tells Moses to instruct the people, I'm going to raise up a prophet from among their countrymen like you, Moses, and I will put my words in his mouth, and he shall speak to them all that I command him. God is telling Moses, you want to know, I'm going to send you a Messiah. How will you know who he is? He's going to be a prophet. He's going to be Jewish. He's going to be from among their countrymen. And he's going to be like you, Moses. Okay, so the Jews are looking for somebody who parallels Yeshua. I did like 7 hours of Moses video. If you want to see the parallels, your head will explode. There's so many. Watch the Moses videos. There's 5 of them. Well, let's take Genesis 1:1 and let's write it backwards. All right? You can see it's written backwards. Okay? And then I'm going to re-parse it, which just means I'm going to change the spacings. And when I do that, I get, behold my twin, Moshe, a twin of Yah. He's hinting here about Genesis, or Deuteronomy 18:18, that I'm going to send a prophet who is like you, Moses, and I'm going to put my words in his mouth. Genesis 1:1 backwards tells us that, behold, my twin, Moshe, a twin of Yah. A twin of Yah. This is letting you know that Messiah, that prophet, is going to be Yah. And Yeshua is Yahweh. Yud He Vav He. The hand reveals, the nail reveals. Very nice. Oh, very cool. Okay, Psalm 119. Remember, this is the one of the 176 verses. The first 8 verses all begin with Aleph. And the next 8 verses all begin with Bet. And if you jump down to verse 129 through 136, all of these verses begin with Pei. In the New Testament, we have, look in Acts chapter 9, verses 1 and 2. There was a guy named Saul, and Saul was persecuting followers of Yeshua, followers of the way. That's what Christianity was called then, right? They were followers of the way, which is not surprising. Jesus said, I am the way, the truth, and the life, right? The way. Prepare ye the way of the Lord. Back in the Garden of Eden, when they ate from the fruit, God sent them out of the garden. He put cherubim with flaming swords to guard the way to the tree of life. The way, that's the, if people ask me, what is your religion? I'm a follower of the way. Anyway, this guy Saul, he was a Pharisee, he was a Benjamite from the tribe of Benjamin, and he was zealous on persecuting these early Christians. And verse 1 says, meanwhile Saul, still breathing out threats and murder toward the disciples of the Lord, having gone to the high priest, requested letters from him to the synagogues in Damascus, so that if he found any being of the way, both men and women, having bound them, he might bring them to Jerusalem. He was looking for Christians to persecute. Verse 3, now, in proceeding, it came to pass, as he draws near to Damascus, suddenly also a light from heaven flashed around him. And having fallen on the ground, he heard a voice saying to him, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And he said, who are you, Lord? And he said, I am Yahshua, whom you are persecuting. But rise up and enter into the city, and it will be told you that which it behooves you to do. Jumping ahead to verse 15, chapter 9 of Acts. But the Lord said to him, go, for this man is my vessel of choice to carry my name before the Gentiles, and also kings and the sons of Israel. For I will show to him how much it behooves him to suffer for my name. And Ananias went away and entered into the house, and having laid the hands upon him, he said, Brother Saul, the Lord Yahshua, the one having appeared to you on the road by which you were coming, has sent me that you may see again and be filled with the Holy Spirit. So this guy Saul, he is being chosen to go and spread the word to the gospel, to the Gentiles, to the kings, and to the sons of Israel. And he was a Jew, right? Okay, jump ahead to Acts 13, verse 4. And this is where Barnabas and Saul, they're out spreading like they're supposed to be doing, right? Verse 4, therefore, indeed, having been sent forth by the Holy Spirit, they, Barnabas and Saul, went down to Seleucia, and they sailed from there to Cyprus. And having come into Salamis, they began proclaiming the word of God in the synagogues of the Jews. And they also had John as a helper. And Saul, the one also called Paul, having been filled with the Holy Spirit, having looked intently upon him, said, O full of all deceit and all craft, son of the devil, enemy of all righteousness, will you not cease perverting the straight ways of the Lord? Here it's pointing out that Saul, who is also called Paul. Paul, by the way, there's a misconception that he had his name changed there on the road to Damascus. He didn't. That was chapter 9. It's not until chapter 13, when he's on the island of Cyprus, that we're introduced to this other name he has, Paul. Okay? His original name, his Hebrew name is Shaul, or Saul. Probably after the biblical king Saul, a fellow Benjamite. He was from the tribe of Benjamin. And Saul was the first king of Israel. Right? But according to the book of Acts, Saul is a Roman citizen. And as a Roman citizen, he would also have a Latin name. Okay? The New Testament calls him Paulos. That's the Greek. Okay? We in English call him Paul. In Latin, it's Paulus. But it's interesting, he was Shaul in the Hebrew. He's now referred to as, and most throughout the New Testament, he's referred to Paul with a pay. Pay is mouth. Paul is the one given the command to spread the gospel, spread the word to the Gentiles and to the kings and to the children of Israel. Right? He was given a mouth, Paul, to spread the word. That's kind of cool. That, you know, and Jews, let me tell you, I've encountered lots of Jews And if you mention Paul's name, they all, in unison, say the same thing. Paul, oh, he is the worst. He was the worst. Okay, what did he do that was the worst? They can't tell you one thing that he did that was the worst. But they are all, it's been like they were programmed. Whenever you hear Paul, turn, run, don't listen. It's amazing. That's my take on Paul and the Jews. But it is kind of interesting. Verse 15 of that said, "But the Lord said to him, Go, for this man is my vessel of choice to carry my name before the Gentiles and also kings and the sons of Israel." Okay, well, we're going to kind of wind this up now. I do want to leave you with this important thing. Look, eyeing comes before pay. Look, learn, know, understand, comprehend before you speak. It's very helpful in life, and it's the order in which God planned it to occur. Okay? All right. To God be the honor. To God be the glory. To God be the praise. Thanks for watching. We'll see you back here soon. Bye-bye. Wait! We have a payday. All right. I got one left. I brought a whole case of them. Remember the Sophite forms? Certain letters had a final ending. The Kaf, the Mem, the Nun, the Pei, and the Tzadi. Okay, those 5 letters that have final forms, they all relate to somebody in the Bible. Let's look at the first one. Genesis 12:1. Now Yahweh said to Abram, Go forth from your country and from your relatives and from your father's house to the land which I will show you. In the Hebrew, when he says go forth, he says lek leka. It's a word that's repeated, okay? And notice that they lek leka, it's the same word. They end in kaf, both of them, okay? So you've got double words repeated, both ending in kaf. So the kaf Sophite represents Abraham. Nice. Genesis 26:16. Then Abimelech said to Isaac, Go away from us, for you are too powerful for us. In this verse, you will see 2 words, Mimanu and Mimenu. And they are very similar. They both have double M's, mems. They both have a nun and an vav, from us and for us. So because of the repeated word and the repeated mems, Mem Sophite is tied to Isaac. Genesis 32:11. Deliver me, I pray, from the hand of my brother, from the hand of Esau, for I fear him, that he will come and attack me and the mothers with the children. This is when Jacob is about to meet Esau, and he's afraid that Esau is going to seek revenge on him. Okay? And here he says, Hatzelani na. So you have the ni, na. There's the repeated sound at the end of the words. And that's the part where it says, deliver me, please. So that repeated nuns point to the nun Sophite and represent Yaakov, Jacob. Well, that makes sense. Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, right? Those 3 would make sense. Now let's look at the pay. Exodus 3:16. It says, Go, and thou hast gathered the elders of Israel, and hast said unto them, Yahweh, Elohim of your fathers, hath appeared to me. the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, saying, I have certainly visited you, and that which is done to you in Egypt. This is God telling Moses, go and tell them, gather them together, the elders of Israel, and let them know, I am God, I am Yahweh Elohim, and I have visited you. And that word for surely I have visited is pakod, pakadti. And it's the same kind of repeated word there, maybe a little different ending, but they both begin with pays. And so the pei sophit is representing Israel, which is Jacob's new name and which is the culmination of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. Okay? And we have one last one. It's the Sadi. And the Sadi can be represented in Zechariah 6:12. Then say to him, thus says Yahweh of hosts, behold, a man whose name is Branch, for he will branch out from where he is, and he will build the temple of Yahweh. This word branch is Samach. And this is a name for the Messiah, okay, when he will be called. And the Messiah is going to come and build the third temple, or the fourth temple, okay, the final temple. And this, who is the branch? Who, and you see it here twice. It's here as a noun, branch, and he will branch out as a verb, okay? And it's the word samach and samach. Samach and samach. But it's the same word, okay? And it's got the tzadis in it. So the double tzadis with a double word, this represents, as the Jews say, this represents redemption. That's what the final tzadi represents. But we, as Christians, as followers of Messiah, as follower of Yahshua HaMashiach, we know who this our redemption is. It's Yeshua. And that makes sense. All ends up with pointing at Yeshua, the final tzadi. All right. Thanks for watching. God bless. We will see you soon. Bye-bye.